Now, this week, leaked documents showed that the United States President Donald Trump described Russia's war on Ukraine as a full-scale invasion, having previously only gone as far as labelling it as the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, the history of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine is long and complicated, spanning many hundreds of years, many thousands perhaps, and many leaders. Historian Martyn Whittock has written a new book called Vikings in the East, the origins of a contested legacy in Russia and Ukraine. Now, if that hasn't got you interested, well, wait to see this. Martyn joins me in the studio now to discuss this. So, Eastern Vikings.
Yes. We think about Vikings in the West, the North Sea, the English Channel, raids on Lindisfarne. But from the 9th and 10th century, Swedish Vikings were moving down through the river systems of what we now call Russia and Ukraine. There was always an eastern front to the Viking wars. We hear in the 840s of Vikings turning up in Baghdad on camels, besieging Constantinople, fighting Islamic fleets on the Caspian Sea, and in the 10th century founding the first Rus state. The state of Kievan Rus, which was the first Russian state, which was a huge state in Eastern Europe, combining Norse and Slav cultures, connecting the Baltic with the Black Sea. And that's where the tangled roots of Russia and Ukraine lie, in Kievan Rus.
Now, this is so important because we all know that Vladimir Putin's long, winding and at times difficult to follow justification for his invasion of Ukraine all dates back to the Kievan Rus. But his understanding of that as simply being the birth of Russia is deeply contested.
Oh, absolutely. In the 1240s, Kiev was devastated by the Mongols, and the political centre of gravity shifted to what would become Muscovy and Moscow. And ever since then, rulers of Russia have said that they're the inheritors of everything that Kievan Rus was about. So, for example, when Vladimir Putin sought to justify his invasion of Crimea, which took place in 2014, in 2015, he said this: "Crimea is as sacred to us as the Temple Mount is to Jews and Muslims." What's all that about? It's because in 988, Vladimir the Great of the Rus was baptised into the Eastern Orthodox faith on Crimea. And so these roots go way, way back. And in 2015, he makes his statement. In 2016, he puts up a huge statue of Vladimir the Great in Borovitskaya Square in Moscow near the Kremlin. And what he's saying is Ukraine is not a recognisable sovereign entity. We've inherited all of that, and the little Russians, which is what he tends to call Ukrainians, need to come into the fold with the great Russians, which are us, because they're not an independent people. We're annexing the history, and we are basically saying we have inherited it all.
It's a bit like the English saying, well, France really should have our king, because ultimately we can trace our descendants down from the Normans.
Very much so. I guess all of us are a little bit picky and selective in our history, but we all believe in deep stories, things about the past that help explain who we are and what we are. And the Kievan Rus, which basically are these Viking and Slav dynasties of the 10th century, over 1,000 years ago, are there at the heart of the tangled roots of Russia and Ukraine, and it also helps Vladimir Putin. So, for example, last year at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, he basically said that Russia is now the true home of Western European values. The Western Europeans have lost it, he said. We're now where Holy Russia exists. This is Orthodox faith, represents true traditional values. Why? Because, as the primary Russian chronicle says, it was founded, Rus, by these Swedish Viking adventurers. So he's making this connection to Western Europe in order to say that Russia is now the true repository of Western values, Western Christian values. There's a battle going on for the soul of the continent, not just the country.
Have you been getting a load of spam in your email recently? What about random calls? It's really annoying, isn't it? Data brokers are out there collecting your personal information. Anything from your email, your full name, your address, and even your political affiliation. Cyber criminals can even use AI to mimic the voices of friends and family to trick people into sending them money. And it gets even worse. People out there are getting huge loans taken out in their names without even knowing about it. But don't worry, because the sponsor of this video, Incogni, can help. They reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information is removed from their databases. Incogni continues to make sure that your data is removed automatically from the internet via repeated removal requests. So, how can you get started? Well, step 1, hit the link in the description. Create an Incogni account and tell us whose data you'd like removed. Step 2, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf. Step 3, sit back, relax, and watch Incogni work. They will update consistently so you know when your data has been removed. Incogni is risk-free for 30 days, so you can try it for yourself and you'll get a free refund if the service isn't for you. So take back your personal data today with Incogni. Use the code GBNews using the link in the description below and you'll get 60% off an annual payment plan.
Now, I was fascinated to stumble across in your book a name that I recognised, a name that I think every school child in the country would recognise, that of Harold Hardrada, the Viking who claimed the English crown in 1066, was defeated, of course, up north on Stamford Bridge.
Stamford Bridge,
that's the one. There's all sorts of stories about Stamford Bridge. But for a time in his life, he was travelling through Kiev, Ukraine, and even Constantinople.
Yeah, because these trade routes connected Scandinavia via the Baltic, through the river systems, with the Black Sea, with Constantinople, now Istanbul, with the Caspian, which is where the western end of the Silk Roads meet. People were travelling backwards and forwards. Huge numbers of slaves went one way and the other way because the Vikings were great slavers of the Slavs. And
which is where we get the word slave from.
That's one of the traditional explanations of it, that's right. And Harold Hardrada is one of those people that tries his luck on the eastern route. When things don't work out in Scandinavia, you try your luck in the east because there's all sorts of connections there. And yes, he's in Ukraine, he's in Constantinople, and we find this connection of somebody who ends up dying in what's now Yorkshire in the early autumn of 1066, had earlier than that fought in the Varangian Guard of the Eastern Roman Emperor, where if you go to Hagia Sophia, carved into the marble at the top there in runes, it basically says, another Viking, Halfdan, was here, scratched in the marble.
I mean, it's just extraordinary to think about it.
Yep.
We sort of think of the Anglo-Saxons of 1066 as never really going much further than their own little villages.
Yep.
But at the same time, you had Vikings spanning different continents in their trade routes and in their own, I suppose, militaristic ventures as well.
Absolutely. I mean, in 1016, for example, when the Danish king Canute conquered England, we forget about that because of the 1066 Norman conquest. It gets a bit kind of subsumed.
And because we mainly think about him trying to stop the sea.
Absolutely, absolutely. What happened to the children of the previous king, Edmund Ironside? How did they get them out of the murderous hands of Canute? Well, they end up going to Sweden, then they go to Germany, they end up in, we think, in Kiev, they end up in Ukraine, and then in Hungary. The Viking world covered huge areas, not just the North Sea and not just our bit of it.
And perhaps it explains some of the more Viking behaviour of the Russian state today.
May well do so, yes.
Martyn Whittock, thanks so much. It's been such a fascinating conversation. I wish we had more time. Your book, of course, is Vikings in the East, from Vladimir the Great to Vladimir Putin. An absolutely fascinating story.